Hi, I'm Tom Burgess, and thank you for listening to The Real Agenda. Welcome to our weekly studio show that sets the alarm off of what's really happening in our country and what we can do about it. Now, the weekly Wake Up is part of the Real Agenda network of podcasts for political change. We now know that 92,153 people have chosen a person to be Prime Minister. That's a massive 0.2% of the electorate. Well, is that democracy? That only leaves 99.8% of the electorate who could have possibly made a different choice. Anyway, because of this, we're going to be talking about the political agenda we would like to see, which does not include high-speed rail being replaced by an alpine chairlift, or plans to build a yellow brick garden wall in the middle of the English Channel, or the La Manche, as our neighbours call it. Is that right, Hugh? La Manche?
La Manche.
La Manche. Okay, thank you very much. As our neighbours call it, to keep the pickaninnies out. Anyway, our agenda is firmly focused on the 14 million people in poverty who suffer the hardship and despair every day, and this can be resolved. Now, we're a bit depleted this week on the weekly Wake Up, as Satya, my pioneer co-host, is not able to make it due to a family invasion. And our new team member, Leah, who was going to make her hosting debut today, we heard her briefly last week, but she's been called away to a meeting with her New York team at the company's largest client, so you can't miss that. Anyway, the show must go on, though it may be a bit shorter this week. Who's left here? Well, I can see that there's Hugh. You here, Hugh? You've just spoken?
How
you doing?
I'm great, thanks. I'm great, Tom.
Good. Well, you're all fired up for another great show, and we've got Oliver. How you doing,
Tom?
Oliver?
I'm great. I'm even great.
We know you're great. Well, you've had a busy
But I'm
week.
missing the biscuits.
And the biscuits. Well, you can go out and get some then. We'll have to take a break. We've got to stop now and go and get the biscuits.
No. Let's
all right to
press
the end
on,
of the
press
show?
on.
Press on. Okay, well, that's good to know. Okay, so that's Oliver and Hugh, but we actually have another potential new recruit joining us today, and that's Eddie Stott. Welcome to the team, Eddie. Tell us a bit about why you're interested in getting involved in the Real Agenda.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tom. I'm interested in the Real Agenda because I think the mission statement here of trying to take aim at the causes of social injustice is just a fantastic mission statement.
Good, well, thanks. And what about a bit about your background? Tell us what you're up to these days.
So I am an MA student and an audio documentary producer. I study at Goldsmiths University of London and I'm born and bred a Londoner.
Well, that's very good. And you're working on the MA in radio.
I am. I'm doing an MA in radio. I've been doing that over the last year. And that's include having work featured on the BBC. And I'm also a freelance podcast producer.
Well, that's very good. We're really pleased to have you. We wondered where you were. And it's good to have a professional on the team. And you're going to be a really busy man here. Thank you very much. He's got to come back next week because he's got the T-shirt. Thanks, Eddie. And it's good to meet you. Anyway, you can find out more about the Real Agenda on our website. That's realagenda.org. Now, the plan of this show is that each member is going to introduce a topic, but we've narrowed it down a bit more today. But each topic, we're really keen to relate it to what we call the Real Agenda. So that's inequality and low incomes, unaffordable housing, and all these serious issues that affect millions of people every day, particularly the 14 million people in poverty. So to start us off today, Hugh, tell us what we're going to be talking about, or what you're going to start us talking about today.
Well, Tom, I want to be talking about Boris Johnson's speech.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, that's the way you should do it. Yes, come on, everyone. Optimism. From dud to dude. Bring some energy.
Explain that, Hugh.
Dud. Deliver Brexit. Unite the country. Defeat Jeremy Corbyn. They really should have added that E to add energy. Energize. I mean, is that just too optimistic? Is it simply...
Where do you want us to start? Because I think the thing is here, have we seen any sight of any addressing the Real Agenda? What issue did you want to start talking about? So we're going to be talking about this because concerned about whether the Real Agenda is going to be addressed. But what was the first thing you wanted to talk about on that?
I think I want to talk about optimism and the message that's being delivered here. When you have a Prime Minister that's delivering a very positive message and is so enthusiastic, you really need to think, well, okay, are these just words? And that's what I want to talk about. Are these just words?
Well, do you want the simple answer or the long answer? They can give you the simple answer. I think they're just words in the sense that I think, from my point of view, and the others can have a go in a moment, but I think the thing there is they are just words. I mean, we've seen that before with Theresa May gave, in my view, a brilliant speech when she talked about solving the burning injustices, but never did anything about it, much as though she might have wanted to. And are we going to get the same thing again? Is it just rhetoric and not a clue what to do?
I do have to say, though, actually, and I have to point out I'm not a Boris fan necessarily, and we shouldn't mention that name too often on this show, is that the optimism is actually quite keen. I think there is a sea change that is about to take place within our political arena just because we have a different person at the head. And I think Boris's optimism, I think, is a good thing. Whether it translates into something that can unite the country and deliver a Brexit for everyone is another question.
Can I just have a hands up here? Who has had a boss in their lives who has been that really, really optimistic boss saying, you can do it, you can get it done? Who has had that?
I have them right now.
You've got one right now. Okay.
I've always been the boss, actually, apart from 2 years of my career. So, but I am always very optimistic. But I think you've got to deliver. You've got to deliver through on it.
Well, and who here has been let down by that boss? You don't have to answer all of that. but I've had very optimistic people going, yes, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it, full well knowing that it is not possible and only expecting to receive a second-rate outcome. So really saying we can do it, but then actually, are we just going for Theresa May's deal?
Talking about management, that's just not enough. The bosses or leaders, which is what we're looking for, leaders that can truly lead and take people with them. They say something and they can follow it through. That's what we're looking for. And I think the general opinion, it's not just my opinion, is that we now have someone that, yes, they may be optimistic, they maybe don't really have a clue what to do, and they could bring a team in that may do the stuff. So yes, but overall, I think the whole agenda that has been touched on very lightly is completely off key. And you wanted to talk about the Brexit angle, though, did you, Oliver?
Well, I just wanted to mention you talk about sort of leaders. I think he's Boris Johnson's new cabinet, which I think is predominantly full of Brexiteers, which will sort of support his agenda. The question again for me is, are they going to pee off the 48% who didn't vote for Brexit, or are they going to pander to the people who did vote for Brexit and divide the country even more?
What's interesting is we talk about the real agenda and an agenda of social justice, and I think what Boris Johnson has displayed is that social justice isn't on his agenda. That's not what he's concerned about. That's not what the Tory party is concerned about. I think what this whole thing has established is that the Conservative Party really are concerned about self-preservation, and that they know they need to deliver Brexit, especially the Brexiteer wing of the party, because that's what they promised. And they know they need to defeat Jeremy Corbyn because he's an existential threat to their party. I think that, talking about what Boris Johnson will mean for fixing the ills of our current society, I think the appointment of Boris Johnson in itself is almost a sign that that is not what the governing party are interested in doing.
It wasn't actually said in his acceptance speech or the speech that he made outside Downing Street. It was so noticeable that there wasn't, they're talking about social care, yes, very important. But where was it? This 14 million in poverty, and how are we going to resolve that? And all the other social injustices. It was just a string of bits and pieces.
They're gonna get fibre optic broadband, aren't they?
That's
the closest thing I heard to delivering something. That's the closest.
Well, I think and I mean, without being trying to be cynical, there, it's been shown that obviously those in poverty and low incomes can't afford to go out and enjoy themselves. It's all about the internet, because the internet connects them to the outside world, and I mean, it's better than it used to be in the past when it was just television. Having high-speed broadband for everybody is absolutely terrific, particularly for businesses as well, and particularly in remote areas. And I completely agree with it, but it's so easy to say, but I want to see it delivered.
And I absolutely agree with Eddie, actually, on the Conservatives' main aim has been to keep the Conservatives in power from Theresa May, and it probably will be for Boris. But one of his aims in uniting the country, he had a real opportunity to unite the country by, implementing policies that affect those 40 million people who are in poverty. If he's serious about uniting the country, he can do things to help those people.
He can, or indeed the government can, and they've consistently not done it. Since the Conservative Party have been in, I think there's a lot of well-meaning people in there, but they've actually moved us backward in terms of the quality of life and living standards.
Absolutely.
It's just not getting anywhere, and yet we know the simple things that can be done. Well, one of the things I thought that he did mention, which I think is very important, is to do with tax reform. So once again, we're only taking this from the speech that the now Prime Minister gave outside Downing Street about tax reform. But the things he mentioned in tax reform was about investment, to encourage investment in the country and things like that. There's so much more than that. And we've got income taxes being paid by people who can't afford it. We've got other totally unfair, regressive taxes. We've got a council tax system that's out of date. We need a tax on wealth. We need to change the council tax system so that people with bigger properties are putting more back into the community. And these simple things could be done. I don't actually think you'll get anywhere with the current government. Hopefully the next government will start to make changes in that area and actually realise that we all create the wealth, and that therefore some of that wealth needs to be put back into the community, and that way we can afford the services to help us all. What does anyone think about that?
Well, I personally think that taxes, this is on the corporate side, can be good if they encourage, I guess it's back to supply side economics, and if companies invest in their companies, they employ more people, there's more income to go around, people affect consumer spending, the sort of classic story as such. But I think the other side, which you're talking about, Tom, is about the personal income tax, which I guess his rhetoric isn't very good on that.
Well, it isn't. I mean, the only thing he mentioned, and that was mentioned in the Hustings things, was actually increasing the rate from, reducing, increasing the threshold for the higher paid.
And 50,000 to 80,000.
Yeah, and I would want to see that increase for the lower paid. It's ridiculous that people start paying income tax at 11,500. That's not enough to live off. It's nowhere near enough to live off. And why are you paying? You're paying VAT on everything. You're paying council taxes and other things. We've got to raise the minimum income standards so people can afford to live.
So we're basically agreeing that Mr. Johnson is not going to solve any of the injustices in our society.
I would like to think that he would do, but I mean, I can't see how that. I don't think they've actually worked out how they were going to do it. What do you think, Eddie?
I mean, I agree. I mean, just to play devil's advocate, Johnson's advocate, as it were, I don't think that. I mean, Boris Johnson would claim that his intent to raise the highest tax threshold is not a malicious attempt to keep the rich wealthy and to exacerbate inequality. He would claim that the optimal tax rate is lower, and historically revenue has been highest where the government find an optimal tax rate. That's not how it bores out in reality a lot of the time, but that would be the classic argument of someone of Boris Johnson's political persuasion, perhaps. But I think also, you just need to look at Boris Johnson's history to know that there is no evidence that he is someone who is concerned with, as I said before, fixing an ill such as income inequality. I mean, for example, we saw how do you get a position as a government advisor to Boris Johnson? It's not by showing a history of being competent or showing a history of being an empathetic person who cared about the ills in society. It's by being his ex-landlord, for example, who let him live rent-free, or it's by being in charge of the 2016, having a high position in the 2016 Brexit campaign, such as Dominic Cummings. I don't think it's early enough to say for sure whether Boris Johnson will be able to fix these. But if you look at his track record, I don't think there's a huge reason to be brimming with confidence.
I quite understand.
Yeah, I just want to come back to, I guess, we haven't mentioned his time as, London Mayor, because I was speaking to a couple of friends who worked on the Olympics, actually, when he was London Mayor, and people who weren't necessarily Boris supporters. And back to Hugh's point about optimism, I have to admit, they admitted as well that he did bring London together, which obviously is a very multicultural city. Is that a microcosm of what he could potentially do on a different stage, or is it a completely different thing that he needs to be a statesman to bring the country together, which is a separate issue? Anybody
coming in as a new leader, we have to give them some time to prove it, I think. But the consensus here is that, he hasn't proved it in the past, although, if you're saying that when he was Mayor of London, he had optimism, but the people that I've known that have worked with him there say it was chaotic. He doesn't and it's been reported a lot in the media. He can't remember things. He's not briefed. He doesn't pay attention. One day he thinks about one thing, and one day he thinks about another. But I don't really want to talk about so much about. We're getting to talk about too much about the character.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we should be talking about the positive agenda here, which is really what we're about. And I think that the summation of what we're saying here is that this doesn't seem to have been focused on. And I'll have to mention it again. The 14 million in poverty and how to try to change that. Now you could say, well, he didn't mention it because the Conservative Party have been in power for a while and things haven't improved. So he's got to either come up with new ways of fixing it or actually make the ways, put forward things that we know that can be done. That is the real agenda.
I think it's interesting talking about inequality in this conversation, because I think something I'm going to be interested in going forward is going to be the equality with which us as a society and the media look at a figure like Boris Johnson and look at what he said regarding Muslim people in the recent past, and I think it's interesting to compare that with the Jeremy Corbyn anti-Semitism debate, in which I myself have been critical of Jeremy Corbyn, but I think we now all have an opportunity to reflect and think, are we willing to treat faith-based groups equally, and are we willing to level Boris Johnson with the criticism he himself levelled Jeremy Corbyn with, of having issues of possibly having racist tendencies. And I think that is an interesting thing to watch unfold in the coming months and possibly years with Boris Johnson's premiership. If the nation that Boris Johnson has talked about uniting, if that actually includes uniting every British citizen, or if that includes uniting the British citizens that Boris Johnson wants to unite.
I think that's an interesting angle. Yeah, we need to unite the whole country, and it's so easy to say unite the whole country, but what initiatives are you going to talk about? And in a short speech, you can't be too specific, but we don't seem to have had any specifics. Anybody else got anything to add on that? So the sort of consensus around the table here then is really it's only fair that there's a new Prime Minister or leader elected, we give them an opportunity to prove themselves. But judging by past record, the new changes that happen, we like to hear the optimism, but we're just a bit concerned whether we carry it through. But we'd love it if it was carried through. But they've missed out several things that are so important to the real agenda and the 14 million people that are in poverty who need to be really focused on.
You know what? I think we should consider it a little bit like a football manager.
Really?
Yeah, if he loses a couple of games, well, then he's out.
Okay. I don't know if we can go to a couple of games, but we'll see.
Or more than a couple of games.
Anyway, so well, we're going to wrap that one up for this week, and we'll no doubt be monitoring the situation as it progresses. So, but just before we go, I just wanted to tell you about a trip that I did to Leicester in the last week. And now I used to be a student at Leicester Polytechnic. It's now De Montfort University. Maybe soon it's going to be renamed Richard III University, since they found his remains in a nearby car park recently. Anyway, I graduated with a degree in public administration. It's such a long time ago, I've nearly forgotten. But the high spot of the time I was there, when it was 2 years, I spent full-time as the president of Students' Union. The other day it was graduation week, and I was invited to the Vice-Chancellor's lunch. And I thought, well, I'm always up for a free lunch. Anyone else always up for a free lunch?
Most definitely.
In
the city, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Oh, there you go.
Actually,
I come here for Satch's biscuits.
And we haven't got any biscuits.
Well, I remember when I was a journalist, I used to have a very nice expense account back in the day. Those are long gone.
Never mind. It was actually a free lunch. I didn't have to give anything behind. But another reason I went there was to pick up my award. And as back in April, I was awarded Alumnus of the Month over 40 years after graduating. So
Congratulations, well done.
I didn't get a doctorate or anything. They didn't give me an honorary doctorate, which is a bit of a pity.
Is it on the awards? Because we can all see it here.
I know you can see it, but this isn't video.
Proudly displayed.
It's displayed in the studio so everybody can see it and realise how exciting that is for me. Actually, they only started the award last year, so I was actually number 6, not number 506. And just as an aside, before I get onto the main point, I was also invited to be interviewed and taking part in a new promo movie directed by Mark Craig. So I'm just giving him a plug here. Mark Craig was also at Leicester Poly a couple of years after me, and he also directed Last Man in the Moon, which is proving very popular on Netflix right now. Anyone seen that?
Not yet. It's on my agenda.
It's on my
download.
Yeah, it's on my downloads too.
The reason I mention this is to give context to the fact that the Stephen Lawrence Research Centre has now opened at De Montfort University. And I had a tour round, and also there was a very well presented exhibition. And you may recall Stephen was fatally stabbed at a bus stop in London in 1993, and his family fought long and hard to see that justice was done. Well, the Stephen Lawrence Research Centre, this is what they quote, aims to drive forward conversations that will shape and influence how we think about race and social justice. It intends to honour the enduring legacy of Stephen Lawrence's life and his family, ongoing pursuit for justice by answering new questions, debating critical issues, raising awareness and advocating to bring about positive change.
You need to get Doreen Lawrence on the show.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Oh.
Thought it would be good if we could talk to Stephen's mum, Doreen, who's now Baroness Lawrence OBE and also Chancellor of De Montfort University. Well, Doreen, we hope will join us soon. So that's my little Leicester story for now. So that's the show for this week. Thank you very much indeed for listening. Hope you've woken up and that we've helped to inform, involve, inspire you into action. You can email us at info@realagenda.org or you can contact us via our website, realagenda.org. Now, what's coming up on the Real Agenda soon? Hugh, you've got an episode coming up soon. Tell us about it.
As part of our Challenges for Change series, I was talking to the CEO and founder of Big House, Paolo Casamassima. I asked him a couple of questions around homelessness and how he was changing things in society today.
Because we talked about him last week, didn't we? But you've now recorded
did.
that show then, and it'll be ready to go out in the next couple of weeks, will it?
Yeah, very interesting comments.
What's this space?
So we're looking at human rights. It's coming up quite soon. Also, Make Votes Matter. We will be talking to them. So there's a few things coming up on the Real Agenda, plus, of course, the weekly Wake Up. So it's a special thanks to our sponsors, the Reverse Media Group, one of the fastest growing search and media companies. Find out why at reversemediagroup.com. So one thing is certain, people want to see change to a more compassionate and just society, as well as more courageous politicians prepared to do the right thing for the people over party. It's urgent and it's up to us to make it happen. So that's the Real Agenda. I'm Tom Burgess and it's goodbye from the team.
Goodbye. I'm Hugh Clark.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Thank you for your contribution.
It's goodbye from Oliver.
Thank you very much, Oliver. And it's goodbye from...
Goodbye from Eddie.
See you again next week then, Eddie. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
So thank you very much indeed for listening to The Real Agenda. We look forward to talking to you again soon.